Hello everyone, my name is Cnanners, and today we are playing some free-for-all on Rust.
What are we doing, Jeff?
Let's play.
Ah!
Oh, God.
Jeff, we doing another
no.
G-bag.
Hey guys, it's Syndicate here, and welcome to my tutorial on how to pack a punch in transit.
Oh, comrade. My name.
Hey guys, you're watching Silent Liberty, and yes, as you can see, I'm doing a career mode series. Yes.
And there's a... That's a win, dude. That's a win! Yeah, good job, man.
Video games have been a successful form of entertainment for decades. However, are they transforming from a dominantly playable media into a binge-watchable way of passing the time?
Hate that guy.
Just want to hang.
What an
Just wanna hang
asshole.
out.
He's in
Yeah,
front of me.
we
I
can
want to
just
see
hang,
him.
have a nice leisurely drive.
We've all seen the immersive 3D worlds, high-definition graphics, and complex storylines that modern-day video games flaunt. But what is the history behind this multi-billion-dollar industry?
The very first video games were actually placed in arcades, which were pinball arcades at the time. So the competition for video games in the late 60s, early 1970s were these pinball arcades. And if you look at those early video games, they have those kind of characteristics. The most famous game that emerged from that era was Pong, which was a huge success, and then transitioned into kind of home versions of that game that people didn't have to be in the arcade. They could play that at home on their television sets at home. Later on, Atari and Intellivision, Mattel, they developed hardware that enabled you to have games on cartridges that were interchangeable, so you could buy the hardware as we used to do, like the equivalent to do with like a PS4 or an Xbox One. There was a video game crash in the late 1970s into the early 1980s, where basically there was an overproduction of games and lots of quite poor quality games being produced, and that kind of had an impact on the market, not surprisingly. And Nintendo, they were coming into that market. Their most famous game was Donkey Kong. That was initially in the arcades and then on home consoles, and then leading on from that came Super Mario Brothers on the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, and that was one of the biggest games of the 1980s. It made something like $500 million for Nintendo. I think there's interviews that demonstrate that kids in that era, they knew Mario better than they did Mickey Mouse. Probably the big arrival in the mid-90s was PlayStation, Sony, and they made games cool. And really that was one of the biggest changes in the video game industry, because suddenly we're now getting games that are on CDs, later on DVDs, then Blu-ray. So games are much more complex, storytelling, online. Again, the development of broadband was a big issue for video games, because obviously suddenly you don't have to just play locally with your friends, you can play online. That has been replicated across all platforms and most games now, in a sense.
Now we have a better understanding of where video games originated. The next step is to uncover the viewing habits that people have built around the subject.
I've been watching video games online since around 2009 or 10, when the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 came out and the online gameplay of that came out, is when I started watching online, and I'd say sort of carried on watching it until now.
Well, it started when I first started playing a game called League of Legends, which was about 7 years ago, I think now. And I progressed through other games, but that was the first one that I played competitively myself with a team of friends. So I got interested in watching it being played again, to look for, am I as good as these guys? What can I do with my team that these guys are also doing?
Spectatorship has always been part of video games. I mean, even if you go back to the 1970s and the 1980s in the arcades, there would be people playing video games like Tekken, Street Fighter, Virtua Fighter, particularly the beat-em-ups. And there'd be crowds around people playing those games, watching their skill, watching how they played.
Watching video games is 100% something that I've grown up doing, from watching my brother play when I was younger, and you wouldn't be allowed to return, to now watching Fortnite videos on Twitch and watching different gamers on Twitch. So yeah, it's been something that I've grown up, and it's been a part of my life now since I was 4 years old.
Oh, yeah! Come on! Get in there! Come on! Yeah!
Matt Hayhoe is a streamer on Twitch with over 50,000 followers. So who better to ask when it comes to why people are attracted to watching these video gameplays?
Some people sort of experts at the game, or some people even can be classed as professionals because they get paid to play. So those kind of people would be watched due to their high level of gameplay, so whether they're the best in the world at FIFA, Call of Duty, etc., or other people will get viewed for having a really good personality and getting along with loads of people and doing good things. So I like to think I'm a bit of both. I'm half decent at games and half entertaining, I suppose.
I think the personality of the streamer or YouTuber is always far more important than the actual game. Obviously, the game holds an enormous amount of importance because it's the game that they're actually playing, but it's the streamers or the YouTuber's personality that really draws people in and it keeps you watching, because anybody can upload footage of them playing a game, but not anybody can have the personality or have the wherewithal to keep people watching and keep them entertained.
That element of competition is enticing. It's something that people want to watch. It's very compelling to watch people play, particularly people who are very good at playing games, because you're admiring not just the game itself, but the skill of the person playing that game.
I'd say it's whoever's doing commentary, if there's over top, that's really integral, because it could even be the way they look, the way they act, the accent, all of those things, because you can just be put off sometimes by simply a voice. Also things like how they set up their video. So I'm more than fine with them having a little picture of themselves in the bottom left, but if I'm watching streaming, I don't want really silly animated donation reward things popping up all the time.
I'm gonna need some fingerprints.
I mean, I mainly play FIFA, that's my main game, and I know the main core of my audience is based around that game. So if I was to play something else, I know a lot of people sort of like, oh, I don't like this game, so I'm not going to watch. And that's the joy of it. There's always something out there for everybody.
Games can be more than one thing. I think it's a very complex medium. There's elements of theatre, of film, of television, music, and play itself. Analog play is all part of it. So it's not surprising that there are people who will find watching a game as entertaining as watching a film.
There's similar parallels between video games and sports, I suppose, because the way people are watching it, you finish up playing and then you go and you watch it as well. I mean, that's similar to playing football and then going to the pub to watch the game on the Sunday afterwards. They're definitely becoming a lot more almost watchable.
You'll have to look at the number of people that watch playthroughs, speedruns, all those things that are happening, on YouTube and so forth, Twitch, to see the kind of audiences that generates, and is making stars out of the people that are at the top of their game in that respect.
YouTube is a catalogue of so many different genres of different content, of different style, of different elements. YouTube has everything. And so in that respect, the people that are on YouTube are becoming the most watched people in the world.
Well, I think the collaborations you get with people like Dele Alli and Drake and people like Ninja is that they're kind of talking to the same demographic. And so there's a lot of crosstalk between the fans of all three of those people, for example. And when you see sort of Dele Alli doing a kind of dance from Fortnite as a kind of celebration after scoring a goal, that's a moment it's kind of an in-joke for video game players and people who play Fortnite, but it's something that is just demonstrating the kind of cultural reach of video games.
Playing with Ninja, playing with Drake online really does highlight how popular watching video games is and playing video games is. And the fact that he's watching video games, and we know this because he's excited to play with Ninja because he's watched him before, highlights exactly how video games have changed so much.
I got 5K donation if you get this dub right now.
One of the most iconic figures in the entire world is excited to play a video game with a streamer, and that kind of highlights just how much popular culture has changed and how the attitudes towards video games have completely changed from being, oh, it keeps you stuck indoors, to being like, no, actually, this is cool. My favourite artist does this, your favourite artist does this.
The popularity of these gameplays is undeniable, but what effect do they have on the industry? Are they a useful marketing tool, or is somebody watching a video game rather than playing it detrimental to sales?
For games like FIFA and for online platforms, multiplayer games like Fortnite, etc., I don't think online gaming in any way, shape or form hinders them. I think if anything, it makes them more successful, it makes more people want to watch, it gets more people engaged in the community, and it makes the game even bigger. And Fortnite is a perfect example of that.
It's effectively a try before you buy, so you might see someone playing it and go, oh yeah, I really like the look of that, I'm going to buy it, or it looks too complicated, or I don't like the look of it. So it's almost another way of, I mean, you used to get demos back in the day of games. You still do to this day now. But I think a lot of people prefer to watch someone else play to get a good idea of how the game is and what they think of it.
There are a lot of games you can get now for 15 quid and stuff on Steam, so I think we're getting more used to that. So when a 45 quid or a £50 game comes out, you're more likely to go, right, well, I could have a look at a review, but I really need to see someone playing this. And something like God of War, I think you can watch it and still, even if you watch it the whole way through, you still want to play it because it's all about testing yourself with your reflexes and things. It's not like a narrative game necessarily. You'll want to play it after you've seen someone play it. So as I said, I think it possibly takes the place of a review.
If you watch a run through of the game, I think it could definitely be detrimental to sales because you might watch it and then either make that decision, I'm going to buy it based on, okay, I might buy it because it looks really fun. But also, if you've seen the narrative, you've seen the story, you already know what is going to come. You already know what's happened. And you think, oh, I just got to watch that guy do it. It was cool. I'm not going to buy it for that reason.
Sort of the games we make here, the puzzle narrative ones, I personally think it seems like common sense that they would suffer. As I mentioned before, with sort of God of War, the price can be a factor. So an expensive game, you're going to want to see it played by someone live, because a review, you never know, you can be a bit cynical and think, well, maybe they were paid to say this is good. I want to see someone playing it right now. Puzzle narrative, really the puzzles, if this is how it goes, the puzzles need to be good, and I think they need to involve reflexes because that's the kind of feedback and immersion we get. If it's a puzzle and I've seen it being played, then I know how to solve it. There's no other challenge when I actually buy the game.
I certainly think there'd be plenty of video game companies, as they already do on YouTube, having commercial relationships, sponsorship deals with particular YouTubers and Twitchers in a sense to sell their game, because there's a really interesting synergy there between those stars and their audience in terms of the demographics. So if you want to get to that audience, go through that particular star and you'll reach that audience directly and in an unfiltered way.
I suppose it's almost like a double-edged sword, because I've done things in the past where a company has paid me a small fee and said, can you demonstrate our game on a live stream on Twitch for an hour? And I'll do that and try and get people involved. Usually there's sort of multiplayer. I've done a few mobile app games. And for me, it's something new for me, which is quite exciting.
The assumption with video game spectatorship is that it's watched reclusively in the bedroom. But with the introduction of live esports events, can this spectatorship migrate from the home to the stage?
I think the opportunity for streamers to travel and to almost do a tour similarly to a musician or a comedian, there's definitely a scope for it. It's certainly there, but whether or not that happens regularly is a different question.
What esports, those kind of venues and what those kind of events demonstrate is that it can be a much more collaborative experience for the audience as well. If you're able to play a game with your hero, that's a pretty amazing thing. And again, it's something that's unique to video games.
In terms of drawing a crowd, again, it comes down to the presenter. Is he good at it, and does he perform well in his role in front of lots of people live? And also it comes down to the actual set. Can everyone see what they're doing? Is there stuff to buy, merchandise, and gathering people together, seeing that you're part of a big popular group. You can only really do that at a concert where you're there with 100, 200 people.
Streamers, for example, are already playing live. So there's definitely a scope for them to travel around, but it cannot be in the same way as musicians or comedians, because musicians, the idea of seeing it live is the uniqueness of seeing it live, whereas streamers are already streaming live. So although you won't be in their presence, what you are is you're watching them live. So it's exactly the same thing in that respect. So I don't think that there's much of a scope for them to do it on a large scale, similar to like Drake going to Russia or whatever. But there's certainly a scope for them to do grouped events. Seeing Myth, seeing Ninja, seeing all the different streamers go into one event like we saw with Ninja's event, go into one event and going and doing that for sure, but not the same way that musicians and comedians can.
We've now realised the popularity of video game spectatorship and the effect that it's having on the industry. They are being watched more and more, especially by the younger generation. But are they the new binge-watchable media?
And you're on YouTube and you're watching one video, you're like, you know, I'm going to watch one more video, and you click through the suggested, and before you know, you've wasted hours and hours in the YouTube wormhole of just watching way too many videos.
Video games are, in my opinion, definitely becoming the new binge-watchable media. The views on YouTube would certainly suggest that that's true. The views on Twitch certainly suggest that that's true.
It's partly because there is so much. So you can go onto YouTube and, as you know, every time you look at one, you've got selection. Same on Twitch. You've got selection of other ones, and they're easy to watch.
I think there are people who would, you know, they'll probably click through a whole series of playthroughs and playthroughs of games just because, again, that's their pleasure, is watching the game unfold and watching somebody else do. You know, you're watching the skill of somebody playing a game, particularly if it's something that's very challenging.
Video games, people are watching them for hours a day. That is no more present than Ninja's concurrent viewers of 675,000 or whatever. It's no more apparent than watching Ali A get 4 million plus views per video per day. That's a crazy statistic. That's a crazy number to get. And people are watching it, you know, binge watching it. And that is, you know, Ninja streams for 8 hours a day and people watch him all day. That is absolutely binge watching.
And I know I get lost sometimes, like a Sunday if I'm watching, just go through video after video. There's millions of hours of it. So yeah, it's possibly even easier than binge watching stuff on Netflix and things. Just because you click it, it's right there. You can just click on the next one. Because there's no continuity, you don't have to watch the whole thing.
There's talk of video game esports as being part of the Olympics in the future. So I think in 2024, I think it is, that it's there as a guest sport. Now, if the Olympics are taking it seriously, then I would be surprised if it doesn't, you know, have an even greater kind of cultural kind of effect on us, because that's the exposure that it needs to take it into the mainstream, because it's still relatively niche. Although these are huge viewing figures, outside of people that play video games, you know, something like Ninja isn't that well known. However, I think that will change, you know, in the next 3-4 years.